Mr. President, right now, this evening, hundreds of thousands of vulnerable youngsters across America are living in foster care, separated from family and growing up in a constant struggle instead of in a loving home. For years, this body has worked on a bipartisan basis to come up with an alternative. We call it the Family First legislation, in order to give new hope to our youngsters. And I'm particularly grateful to Senator Bennett because he and I have teamed up on this. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, Chairman Hatch, Kevin Brady, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Buchanan, we have had a bipartisan phalanx working for this. And now, in the waning moments of this Congress, after the legislation passed the House unanimously, after there were hearings in the Finance Committee, a number of them, and no objections were raised, after we used the process here in the Senate called the hotline to see if senators had problems with this legislation, 3 indicated they had concerns, and we resolved all of them. And yet, it looks like this Senate is going to go home and end up continuing a policy that causes so much pain to vulnerable children and their families. What our bipartisan bill would do would be to say that for the first time, foster care dollars could be used to keep families together instead of ripping them apart. For example, if in a family a parent has bumped up against substance abuse challenges or mental health services, or a grandparent or an uncle would like to help out, that's exactly what could be done under our proposal. Now, over Thanksgiving, and again, I've sort of truncated the description of what happened into just a couple of sentences. Over Thanksgiving, the Family First Act was included in the 21st Century Cures package, the legislation passed earlier today. And all of us, Senator Bennett, Chairman Brady, all of us said together, it sure looks like we're on our way. But after having months to come forward to work out concerns, and I will say the distinguished President of the Senate, who's been kind enough to talk to me about this, we basically said that if a state is having problems meeting these kinds of opportunities, perhaps that there aren't enough families, well, we just give them more time. In effect, we'd say, okay, you've made a good faith effort. We'll give you a bit more time. But still, at the last moment, there was opposition that swooped in, opposition that really hadn't registered any specific concerns during those years and months in which we worked on this legislation. And at the 11th hour, the Family First Act was stripped out of the Cures package. That's why I voted no. By dropping Family First, the Senate basically is sending a message today to the most vulnerable, neglected children in America that it's just fine with us if they just wait a little bit longer. They probably are saying, well, where else do we look for help? And by the way, there aren't a lot of places because Chairman Brady, Chairman Buchanan, Congressman Levin, the other part of the Capitol did a terrific job coming together. So when those families that have been neglected go looking for somebody else to help, When the House has done its job and the administration is with you, there's only the United States Senate. And I'm curious whether anybody's going to come here tonight, Mr. President, and say they're not on the side of the neglected youngsters and families that Senator Bennett and I want to stand up for. So I'm going to just make a couple of additional comments and then turn this over to Senator Bennett. What the Family First Act does is it reaches out to the families that are struggling with addiction to opioid or other substances. It helps with programs that fight child abuse and neglect. And it also makes it a special priority to set standards, basic standards, for foster care facilities and group homes. And I want to emphasize that point just for a moment. Some troubled or abused youngsters have been through such severe trauma that they need the help, the kind of help that you can only get in a temporary, high-quality treatment facility. They're kids who are struggling with mental illnesses or behavioral problems, young people suffering from addiction, victims of sex trafficking. The support they need is unique, and they need access to reliable care in a safe place. But these kinds of placements shouldn't be a destination. They should really be an intervention. And whenever you can, make it possible for the kids to have the opportunity to reunite with kin or join a foster or adoptive family. For the first time, our bill lays down a roadmap so that youngsters don't have to face the prospect of growing up in the kinds of struggling circumstances I've described. There'd be standards guided by the states and laid out to protect the kids. They'd raise the bar for group homes and make sure that the kids aren't sent away and forgotten. And in effect, what the bill does is it turns the system on its head. I think I shared that thought with the distinguished president of the Senate. Instead of paying $1 for families to be split up, the bill says, let's find a way to use that dollar to help the family stay together. Let's see if the dollar can keep a youngster safe at home or with kin, where he or she's most likely to be healthy and happy and succeed in school. The bill has 28 bipartisan co-sponsors in the Senate. I also want to thank Chairman Grassley because he has been in our corner along with Senator Bennett and Chairman Hatch month after month after month. Colleagues, I hope we can work this out overnight so that Families First can pass. If not tonight, in the morning. It's the right policy for vulnerable kids. It's the right policy for families, the right policy for taxpayers, because what we're doing today isn't helping vulnerable kids and families the way it ought to. 500 organizations, 500, Mr. President, led by the pediatricians, nurse practitioners, the Catholic bishops, the Children's Defense Fund, all agree with our basic premise. Try to find ways to keep families together and only look for something else where you have those extraordinary circumstances where you need another kind of care. The status quo is not working. And it seems to me we have a choice. We have a choice tonight and in the morning with 114th Congress wrapping up, closing the books, packing up, heading home for the holiday season. Let's make sure before that wrap-up is finished, we haven't forgotten vulnerable children and families. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor, and I note by virtue of unanimous consent that Senator Bennett has got recognition. He's been an invaluable colleague, a terrific member of the Finance Committee, and I appreciate all his leadership.
Senator from Colorado.